We are now turning to the subject, a subject that is getting a lot of attention, particularly of late, and that is blockchain and its potential for the insurance industry. To moderate this discussion, we are fortunate to have Sayer Martin as our moderator. Sayer has spent the bulk of his professional experience working with investment advisory firms with experience on both sides of the table. He founded Sagacious Inc. Did I get that right?
That's right. That's right.
Good. A consulting and development firm that was focused on Salesforce.com CRM solutions for wealth management firms. Orchestrate acquired Sagacious in February 2016, and he transitioned to the COO and co-CTO of Orchestrate. And just last month, Orchestrate announced that it is being acquired by Conga, a global company, and that will enable them to touch almost any organization on the Salesforce platform. As an individual with a wealth of technology experience and how to apply that in the customer relationship, Sayer is an ideal person to lead a discussion on the issues and implications of blockchain for the insurance value chain. Sayer?
Thank you. That was a very nice bio. I was just going to introduce myself. As was mentioned, I'm former portfolio manager, CFA charter holder, finance undergrad, former CFA Society of Iowa president, self-taught software developer. So that's where kind of both sides of the industry table comes in. But I'm actually more excited to be here on stage with these two esteemed gentlemen that know a lot more about blockchain and its value with the insurance industry than I do. So I'll let the two of them, Pete and then David, introduce themselves. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Well, good morning. I'm Pete Miller. I'm president and CEO of the Institutes. The Institutes does a lot of things, including CPCU, if you're familiar with that. And just recently, we started a blockchain alliance. So I grew up in this industry in IT. That's my background, and did a lot of different sort of development and database development and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
Hi, I'm David Edwards. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called ChainThat. At ChainThat, we specialize in blockchain solutions for the insurance industry. We've been going now for about 2.5 years. My background is working in the London insurance market, and this is my first time in Iowa, and I've really enjoyed myself so far.
All right. So most of us have heard about cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum. There are close to 1,600 cryptocurrencies at last count. And we've also heard that this underlying technology is extremely valuable or has extremely valuable implications for the business world. Can you take us through what the basics of blockchain and distributed ledger technology is? I'll let David take that one.
Yes, so blockchain is a special type of distributed ledger technology, and you've probably heard of smart contracts as well, which are neither smart nor contracts. So to look fundamentally what distributed ledger technology is, it allows two trading parties to guarantee what I see, you see. And that is about as simple as it gets, without any third party sitting in the middle trying to be the authority on that. Now, smart contracts, like we said, not smart, they're not contracts. It's in effect code, which then enables a shared process between parties, or a shared workflow. So by combining a distributed ledger, which is in effect a shared perception of truth, and smart contracts, which is a shared process, we can now have a decentralized system between trading parties where we can trade without that central body, and we can guarantee what I see, you see.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I might. The reason I'm very excited about this technology is because it's going to help our industry do our job better. How's it going to do that? Because it's going to allow us to provide more services, I believe, at less cost. You know, I think the best loss is the loss that never happens if I'm a consumer. And I think the thing that I'm very excited about, and as a person who's been in IT for a long time, I've seen technologies come and go. But if you look at the confluence of Internet of Things, blockchain, and data analytics, and you start to combine those capabilities, that allows, I think, for real-time monitoring of risk more effectively so we can take mitigation steps. So we're going to talk about blockchain today, but if you think of the bigger context, I think these technologies are really going to transform the industry and allow us to serve our customers much, much better than in the past.
So one of the things you mentioned, which is the data piece of it, with a public blockchain, you're giving all of that information away to everyone, every node on the network. So what you're talking about with adding value with this technology for insurance companies is around private blockchain. What's the difference between public, like a Bitcoin sort of network, and the private network that actually adds value for a company?
Yeah, so I'll take this, Dave.
Sure.
What we're creating, actually, the Risk Block Alliance is an example of a private blockchain. So what is the difference? Any one of us here can get on the Bitcoin exchange, right? If you want to go into the Wild West, in my opinion, but you can go ahead and you can log on. It's wide open to anybody. Ethereum, there's a public Ethereum network. What we think is that business will want to know who they're dealing with, and so we created a private permission blockchain. In a private permission blockchain, you know who all the participants are, you sort of know the rules of the road, and you share data amongst all the participants. If you want to get into that pool, you have to join the permission blockchain. So different players at different times in that blockchain have permissions to do different things. But the basic difference is you know who's there, you know what the rules of the road are, you've agreed upon those rules of the road. What we believe in our case is you need to have a neutral third party at the middle of that. That for us is the institutes. Other people believe differently, but that's sort of the basic difference.
I think it's worth adding to that as well that when you do a private blockchain, you get away from this concept of where you need mining going on. I'm sure everyone's heard about mining and the power consumption it uses, for Bitcoin, it's probably the power consumption of a small country just to run the network. With private networks, that goes away completely. So it's actually, there's none of this CPU intensive systems required. It's actually, it's very low requirements on your IT infrastructure.
So are there other examples of private blockchain networks, and who runs those?
So I think if you look at the technologies, there's three main ones. So we have the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and this is off the back of a JP Morgan who tried to build a private blockchain on top of the open source public blockchain Ethereum, and this is called Quorum. Now, IBM, under the Linux Hyperledger project, has created a private blockchain called Fabric. And then the other main competitor is the R3 Banking Consortium, who went through and evaluated all the different technologies that were out there, found that none were suitable from a security, privacy, and scalability way, and they created a blockchain called Corda. It's not a traditional blockchain, it's a distributed ledger technology. But at ChainNat, we've been through this whole journey over the last 2.5 years, evaluating these different technologies. We started with Ethereum, Iris, Quorum, Fabric, and we've ended up on the Corda platform. And I think we're seeing other consortiums as well. We probably see for insurance, it's the most suitable platform. And that's what we're going to start to see, a common piece of infrastructure. So where there's multiple consortiums going on, they're going to need to interoperate at some point in the future. If you've got a common blockchain technology, that's going to make that much more simple to make reality.
So the status quo in insurance today, where does this disrupt it the most? Where does the technology, where can it be applied?
So when we looked at it, when we started the Risk Block Alliance, we sat down and went across the whole value chain. And what we just tried to figure out was, so let's make sure we really understand the technology. At the end of the day, it's a distributed ledger, right? So it's about sharing of data. So that's one sort of pass at what use cases would really be a good blockchain application. We actually sat down and came up with about 200 use cases. And then we whittled that down. The members of our consortium decided which ones to do in what order. But I will say there's applications across the whole insurance value chain, in our opinion. The ones we're doing right now are proof of insurance, subrogation, parametric, and first notice of loss. And then we have about another 15 we plan to do throughout the year. But you can see benefit in terms of cost reduction and time it takes to do task reduction pretty significantly across the whole value chain.
Mm-hmm. David, do you have anything to add on that, on which lines of business it's better suited for, use cases?
From the London market, we found it was in the subscription markets, it's very applicable, where you've got multiple parties involved that need access to the same data and they need to follow the same process. So the surplus lines is very applicable here. The way that we approached it, we started at the beginning as well. We created a placement platform following the Accord data standards. We then looked at the technical and the financial accounting. And what's interesting about distributed technology is that this can then link into the finance world. So today, we typically see you'll do your technical and financial accounting. That will be thrown over the wall to the Treasury Department. Payments will be made, and then you'll try and reconcile the exchange rates have happened, fees have happened, and you can't actually match those payments back to your original technical accounts. Bringing the banking into the platform as well means we can get rid of any need for reconciliation. Everything starts to happen in real time. We've also looked at facility solutions, and we've also looked at the claim agreement solutions from the first notification of loss through to the claim movements, and then actually onto the claim payments via the technical accounting.
Is that core to the capabilities of the platform that you're on, or does that require quite a bit of work to get all those things to talk together?
So the way that we approached it is we modularized it. So we'd have like a placement module, a accounting module, settlement module, claims agreement module, facilities module, MGA module, global programs module. So we're not just going to build one big smart contract, one big piece of code that's going to do it all. We know that we have to link it together, and I think it's the Accord standards that we're going to see that are common, so that all of these, they're following the Accord data standards, we enhance them where needed, and we try to follow the Accord processes as well that are defined.
So what are the quickest wins? There are a lot of different modules. This is the kind of way you think of the world. What are the quickest wins? You want to take that one, Pete?
Sure. So again, just by way of background, when you come to the quickest wins, there's sort of several ways that we evaluated that. A transaction or a longitudinal transaction where there are many players, that's a great blockchain app, right? Or where it can introduce new capabilities, parametric insurance being an example. In a parametric insurance case, if you're not familiar with that, that is a blockchain capability where you can get data from a trusted outside third-party source that then triggers these contracts. So some of the quick wins we obviously think proof of insurance is one. There are production beta versions of that out already. There's a company that's using that. We developed that last December, and that's being implemented at a couple different companies. Where does it become an issue is tying into back-end systems. That, to me, is a little bit more difficult. And so we created a playbook to do that. So obviously we think proof of insurance, a lot of claims-related activities. I think there's some money to be saved there by using this technology. And then you kind of go from there.
Any thoughts on that?
So I think the best place, like anywhere where there's frictional costs today and there's lots of manual intervention going on, and it's all about, with your trading parties, you're not looking at the same thing. So like you said, claims, or when you're actually getting into the accounting and settlement side of things, trying to reconcile between two parties. Some of the studies that we've looked at, there's potential to reduce the expense ratio by between 28 and 35%. And when we looked at the accounting and settlement side, globally, there's a potential saving of $50 billion a year. So there's lots of places to start. Anywhere there's friction today, that's where to look at.
If I might, too, just another one, subrogation. We estimate there's north of 10 million subrogation transactions a year in the US industry, almost all done manually. So if from our consortium members, they're very excited about that, right? Because that's a huge cost savings and a huge time savings. So those are just some examples.
So what's the risk of experimentation for some of these initiatives, right? You want to try it out and maybe you say, well, it's not mature enough. I'm not ready as an organization to do it. Pulling back from that, right? I'll wait 5 years. Is it risky to?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, just maybe a little background on that, we've seen a lot of experimentation where there's single use case, single blockchain, right? So you want to do a specific function and you build a specific blockchain to do that. I think probably, not speaking for Dave, but neither one of us agree in that approach, therefore modularization. So to me, a risk is to look at the architecture that these are being built on. Is it an architecture that's extensible, expandable? Can it be tied into your back-end system? I think what the reason we started this is we'd like to avoid a bunch of different blockchains starting because at the end of the day, they're going to need to talk to each other, and it made sense to us. Let's build it all on the same platform. So that is a risk. If you start building experiments and then say, hey, this is great, and then you want them to talk later. There's some technology risk. Which blockchain technologies are going to actually win out? Cord is a pretty good one, but IBM's behind Hyperledger Fabric, and they're a big company. Ethereum gets a lot of press. So I think you sort of have to weigh all those things. I think what we're trying to do is lower the risk and lower the cost of doing that by combining the resources of the industry in order to develop these things. Mm-hmm. I think we're also trying to create an ecosystem around that so that developers would use our architecture and that sort of thing so that they can minimize the risk of development because we would have taken care of a lot of the development in our architecture and they just have to build the application layer on top.
So it sounds like from an infrastructure standpoint, I was talking to David before this about Corda, and there's no blocks with the Corda implementation. Yours has them, right? Why are they so different, and how do they both work sort of on the same, from a blockchain technology, distributed ledger
Yeah, so it's
foundation?
interesting because there are different flavors of these blockchain technologies. I think they all have the same basic principles. That is, they're immutable. You can't change them. And therefore, there's a good audit trail. One of the things we built was a prototype for interoperability because Corda is a good one, Hyperledger, Ethereum. We sort of, in our consortium, we have brokers, reinsurers, primaries, and they all, some of them have some pretty strong views on what technologies we ought to be using. So we built a prototype to talk across all those technologies because, I have some strong opinions on which ones are going to win out. But I think the basic thing is, how they handle the mechanics of a blockchain is interesting, but the principles, I think, are roughly equal, and that's what makes the technology attractive. The details are different, for sure.
You mentioned which one will win out. Is there a risk there that people should maybe wait for? I mean, how many years is that?
So I think if you start to wait now, other people aren't going to wait. There's a lot of movement, particularly in Europe. There's, you've got initiatives like RiskBlock. Yep. There's B3I, led by some large reinsurers. There's an EY Maersk Marine project going on that's soon to go live. People are going forward with this, and they're going to start to feel the benefits. If you sit back and wait, and these other companies have reduced their expense ratios, how are you going to become competitive with them? You're going to your business is going to get eroded, and you'll end up going out of business, I would think.
That leads to another great question. So the business value from this. You mentioned expense ratio reduction, cost savings. What else have you seen? Any concrete examples you can provide there?
So I've seen reports from consulting firms. They estimate that you can drive $20 billion in cost out of the U.S. private passenger auto industry. I've seen 20 to 30% cost reductions on the claim side. But the technology is still new. When we look at subrogation, as I mentioned, a lot of that, there's huge costs there that can be saved. So there's a variety of different estimates. You could Google them, but they're pretty widely available, and it's a pretty compelling case, I think.
I think as well, there's some new interesting cases that are coming along, what blockchain is going to enable. At the moment, it's mainly focused on looking between brokers, carriers, reinsurers, MGAs, TPAs. But when you actually start to bring large multinational companies onto the chain and start to provide them services, they're now a member of this network, they're providing the data. If you look at something like cybersecurity, it's a very hot topic at the moment. If you can then put a node within their data center that's monitoring their infrastructure, it's monitoring their ISO 27001 compliance, and then because it's all immutable on the ledger, then using smart contracts and the rules, premiums can be automatically adjusted based on their compliance. So it's going to help enforce, good security practices within the industry. And if they stop following those security practices, the board is going to get notified straight away when they see the premiums shoot up the following week.
So that's on the benefits side. What about the costs? Implementation and the training, the change that's required in the organization, hiring talent. What does that all entail?
So in terms of the cost of the organization, I think with any new technology, it's the integration. Integration is always the hardest part. And I see it's not going to be a big bang approach. It's going to be a stepped approach. The way that we've approached it, we're not looking to replace policy administration systems. It's about integrating with them. And then slowly over time, the blockchain would actually become the source of truth for the policy admin system once all of your policy and claim data is stored on there. In terms of talent, I think originally when the early Bitcoin networks and Ethereum, they were quite complicated to learn. So if you wanted to do in-house development, you had to find some quite bright people to look at this. Or if you went to the open market to find them, there really weren't many out there. But now what we've seen with IBM Fabric and what we've seen with Corda, they're now common Java-based solutions. And it's very easy now to get a skilled Java developer to introduce them to the concept, and they can be coding within the next day and creating their own solutions on the blockchain.
Is that what you...
Yeah, that's exact. I couldn't agree more. I mean, initially, if you look at Ethereum smart contract, that's a specific language called Solidity. And try to find a Solidity programmer. Not easy to do. Finding Java programmers much easier. So sure, I agree with Dave. I think we're turning the corner on that. But originally, it was very difficult to find people that could code in some of the blockchain technologies.
And are there firms that will come in and say, here, they do the whole suite for you, set it up, get a proof of concept up and running, help train your organization? Or is it incumbent upon a firm to have a team internally built to implement?
Well, Chain that will do all that for you. So that's our model, is that we'll provide the infrastructure if you want it in the cloud. We'll provide the business analysts, and we'll develop the product for you and support it for you. And as the company then matures and gets used to it, you can slowly start to take those services back in-house to your own IT department.
Yeah, our model's similar. I mean, ours is a member-owned and driven model, members being organizations. So the members develop, all the requirements, and then we have consultants build it. But our idea is that because it's members-driven, members understand the technology, we can help. As I said, we developed a playbook so that they'll ease integration with their legacy systems. So it's somewhat similar.
So you mentioned interoperability. How is that done today?
Very difficult.
Yeah, with different blockchains.
Between different
networks.
blockchains. I mean, it can be done. We developed a prototype, a working prototype, but frankly, we had to go to Hong Kong to find programmers that were able to do that. But I think it's important to be able to do that, at least in our view. There's always a shakeout period in new technology, right? And some people are making bets on this one or that one. So you have to be careful. You have to understand what the limitations of each of the technologies is. But I think over time, particularly if you start working with other industries, I don't think there's going to be any single universal blockchain technology, or if there is, it's going to take a while to sort that out. And so in the interim, it seems to make a lot of sense to be able to talk to several.
How about with legacy systems? So internal interoperability, syncing data.
Yeah, I mean, if I might, that is a big deal. And that is one of the things we focused on two things. To me, this is not so much a technology problem because much of the blockchain technology is built on existing technologies. As I mentioned, I was a programmer. A key part of blockchain is hashing. I used that 30 years ago. Another part is cryptographic encryption. That's been around a long time. Distributed networks, that's been around a long time. You know, there are some new things and there's some new capabilities that need to be built, but that's not the trick. The trick is to get organizations, in my opinion, to work together. And so that sort of is what we focused on. And then you get the technology, you know, driven by a business outcome to get to work to that. So that's kind of the way we approach that.
How are you doing integrations?
So as part of our actual blockchain framework, which sits on top of the likes of Corda or Fabric, we've created an integration layer that it supports as an Accord message gateway. It can, you know, take SFTP. It can provide it via a RESTful API, and we also do the data transformation as well, so we can enrich the data, and we can choose whether we want it to go out in a traditional method, or it can go into a smart contract-based solution. So we're trying to create it so that you can keep running the systems the way they are today, and in parallel, have your blockchain solution going, and then slowly migrate over to it, so eventually then you'll no longer have legacy.
So you mentioned a little bit about the future of the technology, that the core, that maybe there's a platform that becomes common or some set of standards. What about the core technology itself and the use cases? Is it really about exchanging value and contracts and that's kind of it? Or is there something else that you think it could be applied to or will be?
So from my perspective, if you think about this sort of concentric circles, with blockchain and the ability to store transactions on a blockchain, well, now you have all the data. Well, why not do some data analytics on that data, right? Either on your own data or on aggregated data. Or why not have the ability to regulate in real time because the data's there. So I think that, you know, and then using those data analytics to create new rule sets that an IoT device sends you data, and it's like, well, wait. Now I can take a risk mitigation action. So I think if you start sort of thinking through what the longer term implications are, they are significant. And as I said earlier, that then, to me, eventually changes a large part of this industry because I, as a consumer, really don't want any losses to happen. And if my insurance company can manage my risk and explain to me, look, you know, if you take these devices, this is what I can stop before it ever happens, that's a great thing to me. And I'm willing to pay for that. So if you think longer term, the fact that data is one place, you can analyze it, you can create smart contracts or rule sets that now new stimulus comes in, you get real-time monitoring of risk, and now it becomes, in my view, a much different world. And that's what I get very excited about. Because at the end of the day, we're here to protect people. And I think this technology, given that development path, has the potential to do that, you know, pretty significantly.
You have anything to add on that? Future of the technology?
I think it is going to open up some new business models. So when we start to get all the data and the data's in one place, we're going to start to do a lot smarter things with that data, like on the analytics. One of the things is like, you know, adjusting line shares, for example. Today, if you want to, you know, if you've got on a policy and you've got 10% of that policy and then your business model changes and you want to get out of that line of business, today you're going to have to wait till that policy expires. But here we will actually start to see, you know, line share trading going on in near real time. So what that really means to an insurance contract, I'm not quite sure, and what it really becomes, but you could then start to trade and, you know, create new markets for these and new products, new financial products off the back of these policies.
All right, well, we have about 10 seconds left, so thanks, Pete, thanks, David. Nice job, and Thanks for everybody for listening.